Welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive. We're really thrilled to have you with us today
Yeah, we absolutely are.
because you've handed us this stack of sources that, frankly, it reads almost like the blueprint for the next decade of digital civilization.
It really does. It's an incredibly dense set of materials you've brought us.
Right. So our mission for this deep dive is to explore the intensely complex intersection of technology, truth, and democracy in India.
Specifically looking at the landscape right now as of early 2026.
Exactly. And you've given us a really rich, diverse set of materials to work with here.
We're looking at a data-driven academic paper analyzing the upcoming 2026 Tamil Nadu Assembly election.
Right, and we also have a comprehensive policy report from the Center for the Study of Organized Hate and the Internet Freedom Foundation.
Which focuses heavily on the 2026 India AI Impact Summit.
Yeah, that one is fascinating. We've also got the details of a landmark Supreme Court case regarding the government's fact-check unit.
Plus, we are diving into the history of the Nam Tamiler Katchi political party.
And finally, we're looking at insights from the MY Bharat Youth Initiative portal.
It's a lot of ground to cover.
It is, it really is.
Yeah.
And to start us off, I want to pose a question directly to you, the listener.
Okay, lay it on them.
How do you run a fair election? And how do you maintain a functioning democracy when the very definition of a fact is currently being litigated in the Supreme Court?
Right.
And when artificial intelligence can generate a hyper-realistic alternate reality before you've even finished your morning coffee?
It is the defining question of our time, honestly. And the materials you've provided, they offer a front row seat to how this is playing out in the world's largest democracy.
Yeah.
What we are seeing in India in 2026 is a massive real-time experiment in governance, technology, and civil rights.
Because on one hand, you have this push for unprecedented technological advancement, right? The desire to build a sovereign digital public infrastructure.
Exactly. But then on the other hand, you have these deep structural questions about who controls the narrative, who is surveilled, and who gets excluded by the algorithms governing everyday life.
Right. So we are going to unpack the data, the legal rulings, and the documented reports you've shared to really understand the profound mechanics of these developments.
And there is no better place to start than the battle over truth itself.
Let's do it. Let's look at the Supreme Court's recent stay on the government's fact-check unit, the FCU.
Right.
To set the baseline here, the Public Information Bureau launched this fact-check unit back in 2019 under the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting.
And its original mandate was pretty specific. It was to counter misinformation specifically related to central government policies and initiatives.
Yeah, they operate on what they call the FACT model, which is find, assess, create, and target.
Right. So they take in complaints from the public, they research them against authoritative government sources, and then they put out content labeling the information as fake, misleading, or true.
Which honestly, as an administrative function, that isn't inherently controversial, right?
No, not at all. A government clarifying its own policies is standard practice everywhere.
So what's the issue?
Well, the friction here. The reason this escalated all the way to the Supreme Court stems from a recent notification by the center under the amended Information and Technology Rules of 2021.
Okay, the IT rules.
Right. This amendment fundamentally shifted the legal architecture of the internet in India. It officially notified the FCU as the authorized unit to flag fake, false, or misleading online content related to the government.
But the critical mechanism at play here is the safe harbor provision.
Exactly. Section 79.
Right under India's IT Act, specifically Section 79 online intermediaries enjoy safe harbor, which essentially means they're not legally liable for the third-party content their users post.
If you tweet something defamatory, X isn't the one getting sued, you are. That's safe harbor.
Right. But under these new amended rules, if the FCU labeled a post as fake,
right,
and the platform did not take it down,
the platform would be stripped of that safe harbor immunity.
Okay, but wait, let's play devil's advocate for a second here.
Sure.
If the government wants a fact-check unit to just clarify its own policies, what's the actual danger there? I mean, every major corporation has a PR wing to correct the record and demand retractions if someone publishes false information about their business.
Yeah.
So why is it different when the state does it?
It's a question of leverage and liability. When a corporation demands a retraction, they still have to go through the courts if the publisher refuses.
Right. They have to sue them.
Exactly. They have to prove defamation or damages. But the IT Rules Amendment bypassed that judicial friction entirely.
I see.
By tying the FCU's fact checks directly to intermediary safe harbor, the government wasn't just issuing a correction. It was issuing a mandate backed by an existential threat to the platform's business model.
Because if a platform loses safe harbor, its executives can theoretically face criminal liability for user posts.
Right. And faced with that risk, a platform's compliance department isn't going to sit there and debate the nuances of free speech with the Indian government.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
They're simply going to take the content down.
Because fighting it is too expensive. It's the path of least resistance.
Exactly. And the petitioners challenging the rule, they recognized this immediately.
They argued that this structure creates an unavoidable chilling effect. The core of their argument is that the FCU could easily be used to control the flow of information available to voters.
Granting the government the power to basically be the sole arbiter of truth regarding its own actions.
Right. Think about it. If a journalist publishes an investigative report critical of a government scheme, and the FCU flags it as misleading.
The platform is heavily incentivized to remove the journalist's work just to protect itself.
Exactly. It's a structural conflict of interest.
Think of it like a high-stakes sports game where the referee is directly employed by one of the competing teams.
That's a great way to put it.
Even if that referee makes a genuinely fair call on the field, the opposing team and the fans in the stands, they're always going to question their neutrality.
Because the optics alone undermine the integrity of the game.
Right. That's essentially the petitioner's argument regarding the FCU policing government information.
And that analogy gets right to the heart of the legal tension. And it's something the Indian judicial system wrestled with deeply.
Because before the Supreme Court intervened, we saw a fascinating split verdict in the Bombay High Court regarding the validity of this specific amendment.
We did. You had one judge striking it down, citing constitutional protections for free speech and expressing intense concern over the chilling effect.
So then you had another judge upholding it.
Right, aligning with the center's argument that the FCU is a targeted, necessary tool to ensure the public receives accurate information about state initiatives.
Especially in an era of rapid digital misinformation.
Which is a valid concern. The center was very explicit in its defense, stating the FCU would not be used to stifle political dissent or criticism of the prime minister.
But the Supreme Court didn't wait for the Bombay High Court to figure it out with a third tie-breaking judge.
No, they stepped in order to stay on the rules.
Because they recognized the immediate severe potential impact on constitutional rights, while the legal arguments were still being settled.
Exactly. The Supreme Court stay effectively pauses the government's direct statutory ability to police fake news about itself via platform liability.
So the FCU continues to operate as it did post-2019. It can issue fact checks, but it cannot currently wield the threat of stripping a platform's safe harbor.
Right. And the final ruling on this will be monumental.
Because it's not just about the central government. We are seeing state-level fact-check units popping up in places like Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, and Uttarakhand.
If the Supreme Court eventually upholds the center's IT rules, it sets a precedent for every state government to essentially mandate truth regarding its own operations.
It fundamentally rewrites the relationship between the state, the platforms, and the citizens' right to access information.
It absolutely does. But the legal battle over text and traditional posts is almost starting to feel quaint when you look at what's coming next.
Oh, absolutely.
Because while the courts are litigating the boundaries of traditional misinformation, the country is facing an absolute explosion of synthetic AI-generated content.
And the technology is moving vastly faster than the legal framework.
Which brings us perfectly to the second major topic in your sources: India's AI ambitions and the 2026 India AI Impact Summit.
Yes. This is scheduled for February 16th to the 20th, 2026, and it is a massive deal on the global stage.
We've seen the UK host the Bletchley Park Summit in 2023, Seoul in 2024, Paris in 2025.
But this is the first of these global AI summits to be hosted in the global south.
And India is aggressively using this platform to position itself as a leader, offering a distinct alternative to the regulatory models we're seeing out of the US, the EU, and China.
So the overarching theme of the summit is built around three sutras or pillars: people, planet, and progress.
With the stated goal of democratizing AI and bridging the global AI divide.
But to understand what that actually means in practice, we have to look at the India AI Governance Guidelines, released by the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology in November 2025.
What's fascinating here is the approach outlined in those guidelines. They are explicitly favoring innovation over restraint.
They are looking at what the European Union is doing with the EU AI Act, which is incredibly heavy on compliance, risk categorizations, and auditing.
And India is essentially saying we aren't doing that.
Right. They are opting for self-regulation industry standards, and utilizing existing laws like the Information Technology Act to handle any harms that arise post-deployment.
It's a deliberate macroeconomic policy choice. The
Yeah.
government's stance is that at this nascent stage of the AI ecosystem, heavy regulation acts as a barrier to innovation.
They want to cultivate a homegrown AI industry.
And they believe compliance costs will crush local startups before they can even compete with Silicon Valley.
To fuel this, they are treating AI not just as a technology, but as digital public infrastructure, or DPI.
I want to dig into that concept. AI as infrastructure.
Yeah, we saw this with digital payments in India, right? The
Yeah.
DPI system. Now they want to do it with compute power.
The government launched the India AI mission with an outlay of Rs 10,300 crore.
That's roughly 1.25 billion US dollars.
And a massive chunk of that is dedicated to providing subsidized compute power to local startups.
We are talking about access to GPU clusters.
Training foundational AI models requires exorbitant amounts of processing power, which is currently monopolized by a few massive global tech firms.
So the India AI mission aims to democratize the underlying resources. They want to build a sovereign AI stack.
Ensuring that innovators across the country have the physical hardware access required to participate in the AI boom.
It sounds incredibly forward-thinking.
Right.
A true democratization of technology.
It does. But the policy report from the Center for the Study of Organized Hate and the Internet Freedom Foundation, the CSOH and IFF report, threw some very cold water on the realities of this infrastructure push.
Yeah, they focus heavily on the environmental and social costs that are largely being ignored in the race to build these massive data centers.
The report highlights a glaring contradiction in the planet pillar of the summit's vision.
Right. Because building and running sovereign GPU clusters requires immense energy, and India's grid is still heavily reliant on fossil fuels.
But perhaps the more acute concern raised in the report is water consumption,
Data centers generate incredible amounts of heat.
and require millions of gallons of water for cooling systems.
In a country that regularly faces severe water stress, you have agricultural sectors and major cities struggling with access to safe drinking water, and suddenly you are introducing a new, insatiable industrial consumer of water into the ecosystem.
Exactly. The report questions the sustainability of this unbridled infrastructure expansion without rigorous mandatory environmental impact assessments.
Furthermore, there's an economic paradox at play here.
While the government pushes the narrative of sovereignty as a service and subsidizing local startups, the report notes that immense tax holidays lasting until 2047 are being offered to foreign cloud providers to set up their data centers in India.
So you have this stated goal of digital independence, while simultaneously incentivizing global big tech to embed itself even deeper into the country's physical infrastructure.
You're giving them a tax holiday for 2 decades just to build the servers on Indian soil.
It complicates the sovereignty narrative significantly.
It really does. And this tension extends to the government's proposed governance model. The white papers suggest a techno-legal approach to AI safety.
A techno-legal approach. What does that actually look like in practice?
In theory, it means baking governance, safety, and accountability directly into the technical architecture of the AI systems from day one, rather than relying on post-facto legal regulations.
It sounds elegant in a boardroom.
But civil society organizations, as detailed in the CSOH and IFF report, argue that without enforceable statutory regulations, this approach is hollow.
Because if the safety standards are just voluntary guidelines, what happens when a system fails?
That is exactly the point. The report argues this approach places an impossible burden on vulnerable communities.
Right. If an algorithmic system deployed in healthcare or hiring or loan approvals discriminates against the citizen, and there are no clear liability laws or mandatory transparency obligations for the developers,
What recourse does that citizen have?
they are forced to gather evidence against a proprietary, opaque, black box algorithm and challenge the developers in court under broad existing civil laws.
It assumes a level of digital literacy, financial resources, and access to justice that simply isn't a reality for much of the population.
So the techno-legal approach, without hard legal backing, essentially privatizes algorithmic accountability.
That's precisely what the report concludes.
It's a fascinating contrast. You have this broad national framework that is very hands-off, very pro-innovation, emphasizing self-regulation.
But when it came to one very specific type of AI, the government took a sudden, incredibly strict turn.
I know exactly what you're talking about. The crackdown on synthetically generated information, or SGI.
Yes, the policy whiplash here is notable. While general AI development is encouraged with minimal restraint, the government introduced severe amendments to the IT rules, specifically targeting SGI right as the 2026 summit was concluding on February 20th.
The rules define SGI as audio or visual content that is algorithmically created or modified in a way that makes it indistinguishable from a real natural person or a real-world event.
We're talking about hyper-realistic deepfakes.
And the obligations these rules place on platforms are immense.
They mandate permanent metadata or provenance tracking, so the origin of every piece of synthetic content can be traced.
They require prominent labeling.
But the most drastic measure is a 3-hour takedown window once a platform has actual knowledge of unlawful SGI.
The CSOH and IFF report analyzes these rules, critically acknowledging the genuine harms they intend to address.
Such as the proliferation of non-consensual deepfake pornography, which is a horrific and growing issue.
Absolutely. However, the report warns of a severe chilling effect on legitimate speech due to the broad definition of SGI and the punitive nature of the compliance window.
Let's put this into human perspective. 3 hours. Think about that for a second.
Right. You are a low-paid content moderator working the night shift for a massive social media company in Hyderabad or Bangalore.
You get a notification flagged by a government portal. It's a highly realistic, grainy video of a prominent politician saying something incredibly controversial.
You have exactly 180 minutes to decide. Is this a malicious deepfake designed to incite violence? Is it a piece of protected political satire? Or is it actual leaked footage of the politician that could change the course of an upcoming election?
And if you guess wrong, your multi-billion-dollar employer loses its legal safe harbor and is exposed to massive liability.
Exactly. So what do you do?
Human nature combined with corporate risk aversion dictates that you simply take the content down.
You do not have the time or the forensic tools to verify the provenance of the video in 180 minutes.
This is what legal scholars call collateral censorship. Platforms will systematically over-remove content to avoid any shadow of liability.
The report argues that the SGI definition is broad enough that it could easily encompass harmless memes, political parody, or legitimate journalistic editing techniques.
All of which get swept up in the takedown dragnet.
And we've already seen how aggressively the government is willing to interpret these rules regarding AI outputs. The report highlights the incident with Google's Gemini AI.
Oh, that was a pivotal moment. When Gemini, a foundational text model, generated a response regarding the prime minister that the government found objectionable, a union minister publicly stated it was a direct violation of the IT rules.
Which is wild because it wasn't a user posting a video. It was the mathematical weights of the AI model itself generating text.
And the immediate reaction was a hasty government advisory demanding that tech platforms seek explicit government approval before deploying under-tested AI models in India.
They essentially demanded a government license to launch a chatbot, but they had to walk that back right.
They did. The blowback from the global and domestic tech industry was immense, pointing out that requiring government approval for model deployment completely contradicted their stated innovation over restraint policy.
They eventually replaced it with a softer advisory, focusing on labeling the fallibility of models.
But the Gemini incident perfectly illustrates the underlying tension. The state is willing to intervene aggressively, utilizing the heavy machinery of the IT rules the moment AI outputs touch upon political sensitivities.
Even while maintaining a supposedly hands-off approach to general AI regulation.
The state is hyper-focused on SGI because, as the CSOH and IFF report details, AI isn't just a theoretical future problem. It is already causing massive real-world harm.
And that brings us to the most sobering section of your materials: algorithmic surveillance and welfare exclusion.
This is where the abstract policy discussions hit the ground and affect human lives.
The Civil Society report extensively documents how AI and algorithmic systems are being rapidly deployed by state and law enforcement agencies across India with virtually no regulatory oversight or transparency.
We are seeing a massive race toward predictive policing.
Maharashtra has created a special unit called MARVEL, Maharashtra Research and Vigilance for enhanced law enforcement.
Odisha launched Project Shield, which utilizes suspect predictor algorithms.
Delhi has been using a system called CMX for years to predict crime hotspots.
And layered on top of all this is the deployment of facial recognition technology. Delhi's Safe City project alone involves installing 10,000 AI-enabled cameras.
The implementation of these systems raises profound civil rights concerns.
Let's look at the mechanics of predictive policing. These algorithms do not predict the future out of thin air. They are trained on historical crime data.
And the report points out that in India, historical police records heavily reflect entrenched societal biases based on caste, religion, and socioeconomic class.
Because historically, certain communities have been over-policed and over-arrested.
Precisely. If you feed decades of biased arrest records into a machine learning model, the algorithm will inevitably predict that those same communities are future crime hotspots.
It doesn't create objective law enforcement. It mathematically automates and legitimizes historical discrimination.
It gives a veneer of scientific, data-driven objectivity to biased policing.
This creates a devastating feedback loop. The algorithm sends more police to a marginalized neighborhood. The police make more arrests there because of their presence. That new arrest data is fed back into the algorithm, which then predicts even more crime in that neighborhood.
And the surveillance isn't just about predicting crime. It's being pushed into terrifying new territories regarding identity and nationality.
The report details an AI tool being developed by the Maharashtra government in collaboration with IIT Bombay.
The stated goal of this specific tool is to identify alleged Bangladeshi immigrants and Rohingya refugees based purely on their speech patterns, tone, and linguistic usage.
Which is a staggering application of technology.
The linguistic experts cited in the report point out the sheer computational impossibility of distinguishing a citizen from a refugee based on dialect.
Especially given the fluid shared nature of the Bengali language across the porous border between West Bengal and Bangladesh.
It's technically absurd. You have millions of Indian citizens who speak Bengali with varying regional dialects. How does an algorithm decide which inflection makes you a citizen and which makes you undocumented?
The report frames this tool not as a legitimate border security measure, but as a mechanism of algorithmic profiling that will inevitably be used to harass and discriminate against Bengali-speaking Muslim citizens and low-income migrant workers.
The report places this development against the backdrop of what it characterizes as the ruling BJP's broader ethno-nationalist policies.
The report goes into detail on the weaponization of generative AI in this context.
They document specific instances where AI is being used to spread propaganda and demonize religious minorities. For instance, they cite an AI-generated video shared by the Assam BJP unit depicting the chief minister shooting at Muslim men.
They also document deepfakes being used to push a rail jihad narrative falsely depicting minorities causing railway accidents.
The authors of the Civil Society report argue that these deployments of AI, both by the state for surveillance and by political actors for propaganda, are contributing to a broader democratic backsliding.
And the harms documented in the report extend far beyond political targeting or law enforcement. They infiltrate the daily survival of millions through the algorithmic management of welfare delivery.
This is where the technology actively harms the most vulnerable.
The sources highlight the PO Shan app, which the government rolled out to manage nutritional programs.
They mandated facial recognition through this app for pregnant and lactating mothers to receive their crucial take-home food rations.
Anganwadi workers, the rural childcare workers responsible for distributing the food, actually took to the streets to protest this.
Let's walk through the actual user experience of that mandate. To authenticate a beneficiary and hand over the rations, the Anganwadi worker needs a one-time password sent to an Aadhaar-linked mobile number, followed by a successful live facial scan of the mother.
But consider the reality of rural India. Women often do not have independent access to mobile phones. The family phone might be with a husband who is away at work.
Network connectivity in remote villages is notoriously unreliable.
And facial recognition software famously struggles in low-light environments and has higher error rates for darker skin tones.
So the worker is standing there with the pregnant woman who needs food, but the app won't verify the face because the lighting is bad or the server timed out.
And because the algorithm says no, the food cannot be distributed.
It is the tragedy of the Aadhaar biometric exclusions repeating itself on a new technological platform.
The report notes cases where people have been denied basic food ration situations that have historically led to starvation deaths in extreme cases, simply because a centralized algorithmic system failed to recognize a worn-out fingerprint or process a facial scan due to a network error.
When you replace human empathy and localized community knowledge with a rigid, centralized algorithm, the system inherently fails those on the margins.
It's an incredible convergence of issues. We've seen how the definition of truth is being fought over in the highest courts.
We've seen the national push for massive AI infrastructure, the aggressive crackdowns on synthetic media, and the profound, often devastating impacts of algorithmic surveillance and welfare delivery.
All of these macro level forces, the weaponization of AI, the control of data, the targeting of specific demographics, reach an absolute boiling point when you apply them to the ultimate democratic exercise, an election.
Which is why the data-driven analytical paper you provided on the 2026 Tamil Nadu assembly election is such a vital piece of this puzzle.
It takes these high level tech and policy themes and grounds them in the gritty mathematical reality of a highly charged battleground state.
Let's set the historical baseline for Tamil Nadu. For over half a century, the state has been dominated by a Dravidian duopoly, the DMK and the AIA-DMK.
They have essentially traded power back and forth.
In the 2021 state assembly election, the DMK-led alliance secured a sweeping victory, capturing roughly 45 to 46% of the vote share.
They also absolutely steamrolled the opposition in the 2019 and 2024 national Lok Sabha elections within the state.
The DMK enters 2026 as the undisputed heavyweight.
But the analytical paper identifies a complex, three-cornered contest emerging for this upcoming assembly election.
First, you have the incumbent DMK alliance, which is a formidable coalition, including the Congress, left parties, the VCK, which holds significant Dalit support, and various other regional players.
Second, you have the principal opposition, the AIA-DMK-led alliance.
This alliance is particularly notable now because it includes the national ruling party, the BJP.
Along with regional parties like the PMK, which historically relies heavily on the Vanyar caste vote, and the DMDK.
And third, you have the wildcards, the emerging disruptors, the TVK-NTK bloc.
This is the alliance led by the immensely popular actor Vijay, who recently formed the TVK joining forces with Siemens' established NTK party.
Clear. The paper provides a fascinating structural analysis of these three blocs. The DMK's greatest strength is its massive, entrenched organizational presence at the booth level.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, they have a well-oiled party machinery and a strong record of delivering welfare schemes, direct cash transfers, subsidized transport.
But their primary vulnerability is the natural, gradual anti-incumbency that accumulates after 5 years in power.
On the other side, the AIADMK-led alliance theoretically benefits from consolidating the anti-DMK vote, but they are dealing with massive internal structural issues.
The AIA-DMK has suffered from intense public factionalism ever since the death of their iconic former leader, Jayalalitha.
And their alliance with the BJP introduces complex dynamics.
While the BJP brings immense financial resources and national political weight, the paper notes that their specific brand of politics has historically found limited cultural resonance in Tamil Nadu.
The BJP's presence could actually alienate some traditional hardcore Dravidian voters who might otherwise vote for the AIA-DMK.
And then you have the disruptors, the TVK-NTK bloc. Their undeniable strength is raw, potent appeal among the youth and the urban electorate.
Actor Vijay brings a massive, highly organized fan base, and together with the NTK, they are effectively capturing the protest vote, the demographic that is fatigued by the decades-long dominance of the two established Dravidian giants.
But the paper highlights their critical weakness: ground organization. An election in a state as large as Tamil Nadu is not won on social media impressions or viral videos.
It is won by getting millions of voters to physical polling booths on Election Day.
And the TVK, being a brand new political entity, is entirely untested under the brutal mechanics of the first-past-the-post electoral system.
This is where we see the intersection of technology and the electoral process itself. The paper briefly touches upon a highly concerning development regarding the Election Commission's special intensive revision of electoral rules in the SIR.
It details the use of opaque algorithmic software designed to clean up the voter lists by dropping voters based on what the system flags as logical discrepancies.
How does that actually work? What is a logical discrepancy to an algorithm?
According to the paper, the algorithm scans decade-old voter databases. If it calculates that the age difference between a registered voter and their listed parents is statistically unlikely, say a 10-year age gap, due to a data entry error made by a clerk 20 years ago.
The algorithm flags it as a discrepancy, and that voter can be dropped from the rolls.
Which ties directly back to the CSOH and IFF reports warning about algorithmic exclusion. It's the Pioshan app problem applied to voting.
If a flawed algorithm silently drops you from the voter list based on a clerical error, you show up on Election Day and you are disenfranchised, you have no voice.
It is the ultimate form of algorithmic exclusion. And while the state manages the voter rolls, the political parties are desperately racing to capture the minds of the voters who remain on them, specifically the youth.
Let's look at the MY Bharat source you shared. It details the central government's massive push to engage young voters through the MY Bharat portal.
They are launching initiatives like Budget Quest 2026 and organizing experiential learning events in cities like Tiruchirappalli.
It's a highly coordinated, incredibly well-funded effort by the state machinery to bring young people into the fold.
It reveals a profound anxiety about capturing the youth demographic. Because that exact demographic, the young, digitally native open voters that the MY portal is targeting, is the core base of the TVK-NTK disruptive bloc in Tamil Nadu.
The youth vote is the ultimate volatile prize in this election.
To truly understand the potential impact of this disruptive bloc, we need to look closer at the Nam Tamil Kachi, the NTK, and specifically test the incredible claims currently circulating about their polling numbers.
The Wikipedia source you provided gives crucial historical context for the NTK. They are not a new phenomenon.
The party was actually founded way back in 1958 by S.P. Adithanar, but it lay dormant until it was revived in 2010 by its current leader, Seaman.
Their core ideology is strict Tamil nationalism, and this is an important distinction. They specifically reject the broader Dravidian identity that has been championed by both the DMK and the AIA-DMK for decades.
The NTK insists that only someone of direct native Tamil origin should rule the state.
Their policy platform is highly distinct and aggressive. They place a massive emphasis on the rights of Sri Lankan Tamils, historically advocating for an independent Tamil Elam, and they frequently campaign on the retrieval of the Kathathivu island from Sri Lanka.
But they also couple this with a strong, localized environmental stance. They've been at the forefront of protests against the Salem Expressway and have actively supported labor strikes at the Navali Lignite Corporation.
And structurally, they have one of the most progressive policies regarding representation. They strictly enforce a policy of gender parity, allocating exactly 50% of their electoral seats to women candidates.
This combination of hardcore ethno-linguistic nationalism, environmental populism, and progressive representation has fueled a slow, steady electoral growth.
In the 2016 assembly elections, they barely registered, capturing just over 1% of the vote.
By the 2019 Lok Sabha elections, they hit nearly 4%. In the 2021 assembly elections, they crossed 6.5%.
And in 2024 Lok Sabha elections, they climbed to over 8% of the vote share.
They have been building a very dedicated base. And now for 2026, they've announced a solo run for all 234 assembly seats, operating in a strategic understanding with actor VJ's TVK.
And this is where the data completely clashes with the digital hype.
If you look at social media right now, there are claims floating around from TVK and NTK supporters that this new combined bloc already holds a massive 28% vote share in Tamil Nadu.
Okay, let's unpack this. The analytical paper you provided takes a rigorous empirical approach and completely dismantles this 28% myth.
It looks at the hard math of electoral history in the state.
Historically, no new party or alliance has ever debuted at 30% of the statewide vote in modern Tamil Nadu history.
Let's look at the closest historical comparisons. Think back to 2006, when the incredibly popular actor Vijayakanth launched the DMDK.
He had massive crowds, undeniable charisma, and a stated goal to offer an alternative to the DMK-AIA-DMK duopoly. The hype was deafening.
But when the actual votes were counted, the DMDK debuted with roughly 8.3% of the vote.
Or look at Kamal Hassan's M&M party more recently. Huge visibility, major media attention, but they stalled at around 3 to 4%.
The translation of popularity into votes is incredibly difficult. So the paper asks, where does this 28% number for the TVK-NTK bloc actually come from?
The analysis concludes it does not come from scientific polling or ground-level booth data.
Right.
It originates almost entirely from digital noise.
It's driven by social media engagement metrics. The number of views on a YouTube video, trending hashtags on X, the viral spread of generative AI videos praising the leaders, and strategic political propaganda meant to create an artificial aura of inevitability.
It is a prime example of how the digital reality we discussed earlier distorts the physical political reality.
A trending hashtag or a hyper-realistic AI video generated in 3 seconds does not equate to the disciplined, grueling work required to get millions of voters to stand in the sun at 8 a.m. and press a button on an electronic voting machine.
The paper provides a much more realistic, mathematically grounded projection for the 2026 election.
They estimate the DMK alliance, despite anti-incumbency, will retain the lead with 43 to 47% of the vote.
They project the AIA-DMK-led opposition will hit somewhere between 35 and 39%.
And they project the TVK-NTK bloc will likely land somewhere between 10 and 15%.
Now, capturing 10 to 15% of the vote will absolutely not win them a majority in a 234-seat assembly.
However, in a first-past-the-post system where you don't need 50% to win a seat, you just need one more vote than the person in second place. A bloc holding 15% of the vote becomes a massive, highly consequential spoiler.
How does that play out on the ground?
It depends entirely on whose vote they are taking. If the TVK-NTK bloc polls protest votes evenly from both the DMK and the AIA-DMK alliances, the mathematical gap between the two major fronts remains roughly the same, and the DMK likely retains power easily.
But if their massive youth and urban appeal disproportionately siphons votes away from the AIA-DMK opposition,
Then they fracture the anti-incumbency vote, inadvertently handing a landslide victory to the DMK.
conversely, if they manage to concentrate their 15% vote share in specific geographical pockets, say dominating the urban centers around Chennai or Coimbatore, they could dictate the outcome of incredibly tight marginal constituencies.
They may not form the government, but they have the mathematical power to decide who does.
It is a fascinating reality check. The hard mathematical reality of ground game politics colliding with the algorithmic hype of social media.
We have journeyed through an incredibly dense, profound landscape today, based on the sources you provided.
We started by examining the legal architecture of truth, watching the Supreme Court intervene to stop a government fact-check unit from using the threat of safe harbor to become the sole arbiter of facts.
We looked at the soaring ambitions of the 2026 India AI Summit, unpacking the severe tension between the desire to build a sovereign digital infrastructure and the hidden environmental costs and reliance on global big tech.
We explored the deeply sobering human cost of the techno-legal approach, detailing how algorithmic surveillance, predictive policing, and facial recognition welfare systems are actively excluding the most vulnerable citizens.
And finally, we grounded all of that high-level technology policy in the data-driven reality of the 2026 Tamil Nadu elections, watching the fight for the youth vote clash with the myth-making algorithms of social media.
It is a rapidly evolving, highly consequential moment in history. The threads of technology law and human behavior are incredibly tangled here.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to turn it back to you, the listener. What stands out to you?
When you consider the reality of a rural worker trying to get a facial scan to secure food rations, or an opaque algorithm quietly dropping a citizen from the electoral rolls, or a platform moderator having just 3 hours to decode a political deepfake before an election, how do you see these massive macro-level data points infiltrating the daily physical life of a citizen?
There is so much to process in the materials you've given us.
There is. And I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to ponder on your own building on everything we've discussed today.
As political parties increasingly abandon traditional campaigning to rely on vast algorithmic databases to profile citizens as they deploy armies of deepfakes to shape political narratives in real time, and as state election commissions increasingly utilize opaque proprietary software to manage the very lists of who is allowed to vote, will the elections of the future actually be decided by the citizens standing in the physical voting booths?
Or are we rapidly approaching a point where the outcome of a democracy is quietly predetermined by the engineers who code the electoral software?
That is a chilling, essential question to carry forward. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. You brought us an incredible, vital stack of sources, and we hope we've helped you unpack the profound implications they hold for the future.
Stay curious, keep digging into the data, and most importantly, keep questioning the systems and the information around you.
Until next time.